Very close together.
Hello and welcome to the 89th TiddlyWiki Hangout. I'm Jeremy Ruston, the creator of TiddlyWiki. Today I'm unusually joined by a guest in the flesh, my friend Andrew Dorm, who's sitting next to me, and you may be able to see a similar background behind him to me. So Andy, our procedure at these events is to ask you to introduce yourself by giving your name, where you're from, and just very briefly saying what brought you to TiddlyWiki.
Okay. It's nice to meet everyone. My name's Andrew Dorm. I am the co-founder of a skills exchange website based in China that connects Chinese students, graduates, young professionals to skilled academic advisors and applications consultants in the West. One of our big goals is to try and undermine the enormous amounts of misinformation and fraud that goes on in the Chinese application system, and help to get students in a better place to actually engage with the premises of Western education when they go abroad. I came across TiddlyWiki in late August of this year, at the end of a very fraught year, both trying to organize my own mind and trying to organize the company. I work with a team based in an office in China, Nanjing, which is the old capital, about an hour and a half on the bullet train from Shanghai. We have three partners and myself in the business, one of whom is our developer and has developed our platform. We've worked together spectacularly well at times, and we've also had enormous communication lapses due to the amount of energy everyone's expending dealing with their work, I think. So without any kind of a coding background or a computer background, I'm not even completely comfortable using the terminology. I've always nonetheless been desperate to find something that enables me to empower myself to, one, show the developer what I'm looking for, and two, to do my own things at my own pace and according to my own plan without intervention.
And we'll talk a bit more to Andy in a few minutes, but we've got.
Was that about the right length?
Yes, no, that's perfect for newcomers. So now let me. Oh, Eric's joined again. We've got several Erics. Let me ask everybody else to introduce themselves, starting on my left with Eric. Would you like to say hello and introduce yourself?
Hopefully this works. Hello, my name is Eric Schulman. I'm from Silicon Valley, and I've been working with TiddlyWiki for 10 years. I'm the creator of Tiddly Tools, a compendium of plugins for TiddlyWiki Classic, and the author of the somewhere out in the void inside TiddlyWiki, the missing manuals, aptly named. And yeah, and I'm also the administrator of the online TiddlyWiki Google groups.
And Eric is also available for hire for all of your TiddlyWiki coding and development and training needs. Next, Jed. Would you like to say hello and introduce yourself, Jed? I'm not sure if you've got a microphone, have you?
I think I do. I've been having some trouble with it, so yell at me if it's being weird. But hi, I'm Jed. I am currently living in Paris, previously in the US. I started using TiddlyWiki, I think, last November, and have made lots of stuff with it. And I make the inmysocks.tiddlysocks.com wiki reference wiki, and just do stuff. So I'm a PhD student in electrical engineering, which has been taking up all of my time this past few months, so I haven't done much lately, but yes. Hello.
Great to see you, Jed. Really glad you could join us. Mario, hi. Would you like to say hello and introduce yourself?
Hi, yeah, my name is Mario Pitsch from Austria, near Salzburg. I found TiddlyWiki Classic several years ago, mainly for brainstorming, and I'm still using TiddlyWiki 5, mainly for brainstorming, contributing to TiddlyWiki 5 a little bit here and there, managing the German translation and do some stuff.
Cool. Very good that you could join us, Mario. And yes, indeed, very happy that I think we've got three or four core contributors on the call. Matt, would you like to say hello and introduce yourself?
Indeed. Can you hear me?
Yes, you're coming through fine.
Yeah, good. So I'm Matt from Stockholm, Sweden. Long-time Tiddly user, and I've actually been away now for a month or two. But to perhaps people's relief, the reason is that I'm actually learning to code. So there will hopefully be fewer questions from coming from my direction. So, and hopefully I can implement even more of my ideas. But yeah, long-time user, a great fan of TiddlyWiki. It's a fantastic tool.
Matt is being self-deprecating. He is actually one of the most fluent writers about TiddlyWiki. And his site Twaddle, which is charmingly self-deprecatingly named, is actually stuffed full of really cool TiddlyWiki insights, questions, and explorations, and so on, of the sort that most of us don't write down very well, if we write down at all. So I, for one, Matt, am very happy to see you back.
That's very kind of you. But I should mention two things since you bring up Twaddle. First of all, it's at twaddle.tiddlyspot.com. And second of all, it hasn't been updated for, a few months now. So there's nothing new there, but hopefully there will be soon. Yep.
I like the idea that if you Google your name plus the word Twaddle, you actually get a useful result. It's quite cool. And finally, Scott. Scott, we're not seeing a camera for you, but I don't know if the audience can see. You've got the most fabulous avatar picture, which I've not seen people doing before. But tremendously effective, and is going to drive me to create a new avatar picture. But Scott, hello. Would you like to say hello and introduce yourself in the usual way?
Yes. I'm Matt can see me. I don't know if and I can see me. I don't know if anyone else can. The avatar's probably.
Is everybody else seeing Scott on the main screen when he's talking?
Yes, but not on the small icons. I have no pictures at all, but the main screen is okay.
For me, it's the opposite. I see Jeremy almost all the time on the main screen. Right now, I see Mario, but I see Scott as an avatar, not avatar, in the small screen. But I see Jeremy almost all the time. Now I see Scott.
Wow. Interesting.
Yeah.
But Scott,
I have my mic muted, but not my video. It's the Hangouts hangout. No, I just wanted to say that to Matt's point about Twaddle, I've been away longer than you have, and the last time that I was in a Hangout, I think I mentioned in the sidebar, my Christmas tree was up. So it's been about a year since I've been participating, and I've just recently decided to buckle down and decide that as wonderful as TiddlyWiki Classic is, and as much as I've made it an integral part of my day-to-day workflow, it is past time. I got on the TW5 train and got ready. Typically, how I use my TiddlyWikis in work is I archive everything at the end of the year. So when 2016 arrives, I'll throw everything into a 2015 archival Tiddler, and off to the races I'll go with a new day-to-day TiddlyWiki for 2015 for each of my projects. So as the year has worn on this year, I've realized, yeah, I'm really kind of falling behind. I should have done this last year, and I'm not going to be able between December 20th and January 1 to get ready to be using TiddlyWiki entirely, TiddlyWiki 5 entirely at the first of the year. So it's time I start paying attention again. And so here I am. When I did make this determination, I don't know, about a month ago, that it was time to start paying attention, the first thing I did was not even go to the Google group this time. it was to go to Twaddle. So that is a site that definitely has some value for folks, especially if you're a person who thinks in terms of the theory first and then the practical stuff on the back end, for getting my head around new ways to do things and how my workflow should be shaped to fit the new TiddlyWiki models. That's where I started. That's where I'm trying to get my feet wet, and how I'm trying to break myself from the old patterns of thinking that if there are things you've devised on your own using TiddlyWiki, as I think any TiddlyWiki user can attest, it can be very difficult to suss out the difference between the tool and your strategy of use for the tool. So it's been very useful to look at other people and look at how they're making that leap and see the things that I do that are useful to me and the things that I do that are just habits I've created over time, and figuring out where it's time for me to readjust the way I'm thinking. So very happy to be here with that awkward intro.
Did you introduce yourself, Scott? I'm not sure if you did you get a chance to actually do the
I may not have. By way of introduction, I think all that just testifies that
That's a great intro.
Like everybody here, I'm just another TiddlyWiki nut. I'm on the East Coast U.S. I use TiddlyWiki very definitely in my day-to-day workflow. I'm a little behind the times, and I've already given my shout-out to Matthias's site, and I think it's probably about time. I just saw Tobias wandered in, who is my other Tiddly hero, and the other person whose work I've spent a huge amount of time with the last 3 weeks since I've been trying to get on the TW5 train. I think since I've been gone, I think Tobias may have given up on his day job because he seems to be coding non-stop solutions for TW5 for people. With that, I'm just going to shut up and turn the forum over to him to introduce himself.
Indeed. Hi, Tobias. Great you could join us, despite messing up the time. Pesky time zones. How are you doing? Tobias, are you... Oh, I thought that was Tobias's camera picture, but I think it's actually an avatar. Tobias, hiya. Can you hear us? Okay, I guess Tobias may be going to need to log out and log in again or something. Oh, I don't... Tobias, hi.
We can't hear you, Tobias.
No. Well, look, let's kick off. If you don't, Tobias, hello? Are you here?
No sound.
Okay, so well, the first thing I wanted to say was both Matt and Scott mentioned that they've been away for a while, and of course I have as well, particularly from the Hangouts. I did quite well for a year or a year and a half, I think, of having the Hangouts roughly every week. And then summer, this summer, I started being busy in the summer and started having the Hangouts less frequently. And then you saw what happened as soon as they got to be 3 weeks apart. I kind of lost the habit a little. And so today is partly about re-establishing the Hangouts. What I'm planning to do is choose a new time and date and then publish a schedule of all the Hangouts until the end of the year. So maybe 10 of them or 8 of them or something. I guess the law of averages means that 1 or 2 of them might end up not happening at the advertised time, but at least it might help people to be able to plan. And I think what I've learned is that I need to do them very regularly in order to maintain the habit. So as usual, usual for recent Hangouts, I've made a Tiddly spot at hangout-89.tiddlyspot.com with a sort of agenda. But roughly what that agenda is what I've been doing since the last Hangouts, which is mostly TiddlyWiki developments and TiddlyDesktop developments. I've done a lot of work on TiddlyDesktop in the last 3 weeks or so. Then there's a group of list of topics that have been of interest in the group that might be worth teasing out for a longer discussion. And then, as usual, I've collected up a couple of links of things that I think are interesting that other people have done, and I hope to, hopefully you'll all get the chance to show new stuff, particularly conscious Jed. I know you said you've been away, but hoping you might have some new stuff to show us. And it's always useful to get a snapshot of where Eric is with the Tiddly manuals. So if everybody's okay with that, I'm going to just try and cover the things that I've been doing as briefly as possible. But just to give Matt and Scott the update they were looking for. So probably if you dig back into old Hangouts, there will have been discussions about how frequently TiddlyWiki releases should be. And the slightly frustrating situation we're in at the moment is that we've got 5.1.0 in beta, in beta. But the last full release, 5.1.9, was July. So that's not great. We've gone from July to November with 5.1.10 being available as a pre-release. Now, there's really a lot of new stuff in 5.1.10, and that worries me because it makes it very tempting for people to start using the pre-release as their main, TiddlyWiki. And then, as we know, we've run into issues in the past with bugs that have been temporarily introduced into the pre-release, but just long enough to clobber a few people who are trying to use it. So for me, that's actually now the big topic, is getting 5.1.10 out of the door and released. Once we've done that, something that I'm sure you'll remember is I want to re-engineer the way that TiddlyWiki.com is released so that we can much more easily publish content updates, because it's very frustrating, I think, that we don't have a fast-moving, effective news service, basically. For instance, the new graph plugin, which is one of the things that we'll be showing later, that should be on TiddlyWiki.com. It should have been on TiddlyWiki.com the day it was published, because it's attracted a lot of interest and there's been a lot of discussion around it. So let's start by looking at what's happened in 5110. So I'm going to screen share, and here we go. So the things I've done since the last Hangout is a new blog edition. So this is because I was invited to speak at a conference in the UK by an old Osmosoft colleague, Andrew Back, and I wanted to put my slides online, and I'd been meaning for ages to have somewhere where I could publish stuff that wasn't, TiddlyWiki stuff. So it'd been on my list for a long time. So Germaline.com is now a statically rendered site. So these are static HTML pages created from a TiddlyWiki. So as I follow the link to the post about my talk, you can see in the URL there that we've navigated to a new HTML file. The theme is in just TiddlyWiki's native snowwhite theme, but the goal is to have a bunch of switchable themes. Annoyingly, I haven't been able to find decent quality open source blog themes that we can adapt. I did spend some time looking at how easy it would be to use WordPress templates, but then you'd end up with a PHP site and not a bunch of HTML. So doing the blog edition was a bit of a bit of a sideshow, and then there was a bit of a slideshow because I also did some work on a new TalkyTalky. So you may remember that for a long time there's been the TiddlyWiki TalkyTalky, which is a presentation tool that was kind of, yeah, it works like this. So it's a slide at a time, different colored backgrounds, and I've been using this for my recent talks about TiddlyWiki. And then we've also did this introduction edition, which is also intended as a presentation tool, but works very differently. So it works with following specific hyperlinks rather than keeping clicking in the same place, and there's no page backgrounds. So this new version, as I step through it, you can see it has basically the two sets of features combined. So we zoom into the slides, but we get the changing background color as we do so. And this, of course, is a full-fledged TiddlyWiki. So something that I've been bad at is turning this all these talky editions into reusable editions, but hopefully that's not been too much of an obstacle for people to reuse them. I'll just very quickly show you the blog template. Sorry, the blog edition is best demonstrated by looking at it in use. So I had to create a new GitHub account. It's actually an organization account. So I did this and made myself a member of it so that I would get another GitHub Pages account. And here's the source for the blog. So it's made complicated because there's a bunch of other static assets. So in here, for instance, there's things like Cecily, which you will be familiar with, stored as static assets. But the main wiki here are the blog posts. So to create a new blog post, you just create a Tiddler file with the tag post, and it all automatically appears. And there's in the tiddlywiki.info, you can see here build commands to actually build the blog. So as usual, a little bit short on documentation and instructions and so on, but and what I've done so far just felt like the minimum possible amount of work that would get my blog up and running. And I made a ticket on GitHub because I'm keen to incorporate the work that others have done on static editions of TiddlyWiki, and fold them together, or fold the best of the features together into a properly reusable edition. Just seeing a little note in the sidebar about themes. Matt's pointing out that if there was just one theme made, then others could use it as a template and make modified copies of it. That's true, although I'm perpetually surprised that nobody, or that hasn't much been done with snowwhite. So in fact, let me screen share again. So the default theme on TiddlyWiki for some time has been called snowwhite. I just created a variant that just called tight, that removes a lot of the padding and white space. So it was an attempt to recreate the TiddlyWiki classic kind of signature thing of trying to pack as much text as possible. And if we go to look at the tightly packed theme, you can see that it's an incredibly, there's not much to it. It's a 15 CSS definitions. And so that's why it seems kind of a shame that we don't have more of that. It's incredibly easy to take one of the existing themes, to adapt it, to create it as a derivation of the original theme, so it keeps working even if the original theme changes. Matt's pointing out that then a stumbling block is how to share it, which then comes back to one of our outstanding kind of organizational infrastructure issues, is making it easier for third-party plugin authors to submit plugins into the TiddlyWiki plugin library. which is actually the kind of technical discussion that I think we possibly should avoid today, because we do all right with that on on the groups. So let me continue to just speed through, showing you a couple of further things. I don't think that I've done a Hangout since I started work on the text slicer plugin. Does anybody remember? Eric, I think you were on the last Hangout. So the text slicer plugin is kind of recreates something that we worked on back in Osmosoft days. It's an attempt to it's an attempt to build TiddlyWiki into a kind of writing environment, and a writing environment that reflects TiddlyWiki's philosophy that the purpose of writing is to reuse the material, and the way we do that is to cut it up into the smallest possible chunks so that they can be reused. And one of the things that we've come to recognize is that the reality for a lot of people is that they either work in an environment in which ordinary linear documents are the norm, or they've got a backlog of such linear documents. And so for a long time, I wanted to make the path easier for people who live in that world, the world of Microsoft Word, to take advantage of TiddlyWiki. So what Text Slicer is an addition for TiddlyWiki, and that consists of a plugin called the Text Slicer plugin, but also a little bit of tooling outside. So in my day job, I've been having to deal with Word documents, so I've used a third-party library that does a really good job of converting Word documents into HTML files. And so that means that Text Slicer is entirely concerned with HTML files. And its job is to take a conventional HTML file that consists of headings and subheadings and so on, and slice it up into individual tiddlers whilst retaining the original structure. And then that allows us to make modifications to it and perhaps thread the chunks together in a different way. So let me screen share and just very quickly show you Text Slicer edition. So it introduces a left-hand column. It's still the ordinary snowwhite theme, and you can see here there's a sample text. Now this sample text, if we look at the info on it, you can see it's an HTML tiddler, and so indeed if we go in and edit it, you can see there's clumsy old HTML in there. And there's this new toolbar button, Slice, slices the tiddler into these individual tiddlers. Those tiddlers are grouped together into what we call a document, and with the available documents are then listed down the left-hand side of the screen. So you can see headings which are expandy, collapsy, and if I click on...
Jeremy, it seems we've lost your screen here with just seeing your icon, at least I am.
Is that the case for everybody else?
For me, it's fine.
Okay, so I think it's very frustrating to know with Hangouts the difference between recording issues, so to speak, and playback issues. So I guess we'll assume that's a playback issue. Is it coming back for you, Scott?
It is. As soon as I opened my mouth about it, you showed back up.
Oh, great.
So back to non-interrupting.
So the idea is that you can kind of use the central column as a scratch pad. So that's the tiddlers that you're working on, but in the left-hand side, you've got all of those arrangement that they form a part of. If there was another, hello there, Tiddler this is a TiddlyWiki wikitext tiddler. If I slice this up too, then you can see how the left-hand preview changes, where we can select between the two documents that are installed, so to speak. If I open the document tiddler itself, you can see, if I go and edit it, that its content is just that note about when it was created. When we view it, there's an additional view template installed that gives us the entire content of the document. And if we view, say, a heading as an individual tiddler, the text of that tiddler is the text of the heading. But courtesy of this view template at the end, we see the tiddler with all of its descendants. So you see the fragment of the document that this tiddler makes up. So, and of course, it goes without saying that if I wanted to change the word usage to usaginess, then it instantly changes on the left. An earlier iteration of this had in-place editing, and there's a remnant of it, which is that I can turn on the toolbar, and that shows me an edit box with the title of each tiddler. And so this paragraph, for instance, you can see it's called paragraph. This edition TiddlyWiki contains tools to help. And in fact, let's look at this paragraph because we can see its heading as well. So its text is the source document, blah, blah, blah. And it's appearing as the first paragraph under this heading, usaginess. And if we look at the fields of the heading of the tiddler for that heading, you can see there's a list field, and that list field lists each of the tiddlers that constitutes the content within this heading. And so in this case, the first one is paragraph source document must be first marked, and there it is. Now, getting finally to the point, what we can do here is rename this paragraph. And if I click the rename button, you'll see that the tiddler changes, but so critically does the, if I open the, jump to that heading and look at the list, you can see that the contents of the list field has also changed so that it has the new title for the tiddler. So the idea there, sorry if this is now getting rather detailed, is that we've got a characteristic of the process is that we've got auto-created titles, and obviously we can refine the algorithm that's used to generate these titles. You can see exactly what it is. We take the first few words of the paragraph and take out some of the stop words and concatenate them, etc. But we think it's important to be able to change those titles, because if, say, you might have a section on, so say here's a section on how to slice monolithic documents, we might want to use that in multiple documents. And in order to do that, it's helpful if it's got a title that's easy for you to find again to reuse. Okay, so you'll be basically what you've got here is a refinement of the mechanism we used in the table of contents macros. So back over here, this guy, which is based on tags and macros, whereas what we've got here is based on lists. And it's also based on templates, which means that it properly deals with recursive loops. Okay, so finally, just very quickly show you here, there's a view document button that opens an external window with the full text of the document. So in a multi-screen layout, you could have that open as your preview and then do your edits over here. And of course, under Node.js, you can use it to generate an HTML cut of the document. So hopefully that gives us all the tools we need to work in TiddlyWiki, but to be able to interoperate with people who are in the Microsoft Word world. So we can suck in Word documents as HTML documents, slice them up, reuse the fragments, refactor them, automatically generate lists from tags and that kind of thing, and then spit out an HTML file that can, depending on the computer that you're on, can readily be turned into a PDF or a Word document to give back to the people who are still living in the world of Microsoft Word. So,
Jeremy. Yeah, Matthias here. Can I just ask this description that you just gave? about why it's so good with the text slicer edition. I thought it was very good and concise and descriptive. I'm hoping this this almost exact description is available there. Are you losing me?
Well, no. Well, it's available on this Hangout, I guess. I have made a fair effort to document the text slicer edition, but I think it's the kind of thing that's actually very hard to document, because to people who are familiar,
I'm not talking about the. Sorry. No, I'm not talking about the full documentation. I'm just this objective with it that you just gave, that it's for people that want to take a Word document or a PDF document, and they can do that. You know, you said a few sentences there, and I think they were very good and descriptive.
I think it's not PDF document, so it's only Word and HTML.
It's an HTML document, so as I say, depending on your platform. So for me, on a Mac, it's actually incredibly trivial. There's really good PDF generation from HTML documents, and I think I mentioned I use a third-party tool under Node.js to do the conversion from Word to HTML. I think now actually there's quite a few options for Node.js libraries to convert HTML into PDF. I think we discussed one of them at one point. Actually.
It's relatively hard to extract information from PDFs. So.
PDFs on the best thing that I've found to do is to use an online service that's good at sucking content out of PDFs, because it's basically an OCR job. So Google, for instance, do a reasonable job. Not sure I can remember how I did it, but have done a reasonable job for me of converting a PDF into something I can work with, which would make sense given their AI skills. So Scott, this is addressing exactly the point you just raised in the sidebar. PDF to HTML is but PDFs are hard for anybody to work with. So even for the people who are in the world of Microsoft Word, PDF is a bit of a pest, because there's not good two-way. Well, when I last used Microsoft Word, there wasn't good two-way handling. I'm so sorry. I feel like I'm moving on a bit quickly, but there's quite a bit of stuff I wanted to cover. Anything on text slicer before we move on?
Just one short remark. There has been some discussion in the Hangout 88. It's about 20 minutes, something like this, at the end of the Hangout, about text slicer.
Oh, clever you. So forgive me for forgetting that we'd already covered it. So sorry for anybody wading through TiddlyWiki Hangouts for the repetition. And especially if the two accounts of text slicing differ, that would be even more hilarious. So maybe I also showed folding, Tiddler folding at the same time. Okay, so this is the last of the 5.1.10 features. So if I reload to get the normal theme back, there's now two new toolbar buttons. Well, actually several. I'm turning all three on. So we've got fold other tiddlers. So that one leaves the tiddler I'm on intact, but the other tiddlers that are open get folded down, and they get a unfold button, or you can unfold others. There's also what I turned on optionally, these bars that you can use to toggle. So the idea there is if you're on a very long tiddler, like the pre-release tiddler, and you want to fold it, that you can do so without scrolling to the top. Several people have made the point that that left-hand gutter is such a valuable place for user interface components because of being able to reach them whenever, even when you're scrolled down, that maybe we shouldn't occupy that entire opportunity just with folding. I think it's a point a few people have made. folding was provoked by some discussion on Twitter about making TiddlyWiki better on mobile. Another of those great examples of how the kind of dialectic process, one of the big drivers, I think I said this in the last Hangout, of what I choose to do next on TiddlyWiki is what people talk about the most. I think oops, so sorry, I'm being disorganized now. Find the right. There was one other thing which maybe we covered on the last Hangout, external text tiddlers. So this was a feature that I resisted for a long time. It's the ability to have a TiddlyWiki HTML file that contains a tiddler whose content is in a separate file that is retrieved when it is needed, so when the tiddler is viewed. So it's a technique that we've been interested in for a long time for coping with those edge cases where you've got want to have very large amounts of data in a TiddlyWiki file. The problem with it, and the reason why I resisted implementing it for such a long time, is that the restrictions are so intense that lots of scenarios that intuitively people think should work for these external text tiddlers don't actually work. And there's a very different story on different browsers. Matt's saying in the sidebar I didn't cover them before, so let's very quickly do them. So the best way to do that is, oh, I need to screen share, of course. Okay, so hopefully those of you with a decent, with the love of Google will be able to see my screen. And, sorry, what was I going to show? Oh, the external tiddlers, yes. So now, there's a tiddler in here called Alice in Wonderland. So, TiddlyWiki. What I'm doing now is in the sidebar, I'm retrieving that tiddler, Alice in Wonderland, so that we can look at its fields without actually opening it in the browser. And maybe I need to make fonts a bit bigger here. So hopefully you can see wiki get tiddler Alice in Wonderland. Then we look at its field. The text field is an empty string, title as expected, tag is external text, and then we've got this canonical URI field, and that's a relative URI. So without giving too much away, if I do that, okay, so it's trying to download that TID file. That's not very intuitive, but let's do that. So if I download the TID file and then try and open it, so my apologies if this has become hard to follow. So we've seen two things so far. We've seen over here in the browser that there is a tiddler called Alice in Wonderland with a canonical URI field. We've seen that if we add that canonical URI to the URI of the HTML file, what we get is this file. So this is the TID file for Alice in Wonderland. It's got the tag in it, and then there's the text of it. And as you can see, there is a lot of text of it. So now, if I follow the link,
you could open the network tab in the. Yeah.
Good thinking. I think I may have over enthusiastically made fonts a bit too big. Very sensible. Thank you, Mary. So now. It's already got it. That's annoying. Okay, so I've done a refresh, and so all we're seeing in terms of network requests is for artifacts of weird browserness. Each data URI that we use to render an image shows up in the network tag, and so does the Google Analytics spyware. So let's leave that scrolled to the bottom, and now I'll click on Alice in Wonderland. And first, I don't know if you saw, if you're watching it on the recording, you can rewind and check. But very briefly, there was a message saying loading the text of this tiddler. If it doesn't load, this is what you should do. And then it was also almost immediately replaced after this HTTP GET request for the tiddler with the text of the tiddler. So this is something that works pretty much perfectly for images. Those of you who've worked with them, if you have a canonical URI field, you can point it at an image pretty much anywhere, and it will get displayed in the right way. The pitfalls with this external text stuff are really quite profound. There's it does not work well in most browsers when you're on a file URI. So once you post your TiddlyWiki onto the web, it's okay. So maybe that's not such a problem, because maybe when you do work locally, maybe it's okay to have a 10 megabyte TiddlyWiki, and maybe it's useful to have a 2 megabyte TiddlyWiki when you're working with the same wiki online. But there's another problem, which is that after you do the steps that I did there, that Alice in Wonderland tiddler, that was an external tiddler with a canonical URI field, got replaced by the actual tiddler. And so that means that if I open that tiddler and then save the document, then it stops being an external tiddler. It gets reincorporated into the body of the document. And that behavior will be unexpected for most people and the source of much mashing of teeth.
I think it is also part of the question from Scott in the sidebar.
So Scott says, could you have, say, an HTML file consisting of multiple TID files that would allow you to view read-only those tiddlers on demand? Could you use this to preview, read the entire contents of another TiddlyWiki file? Interesting. At the moment, Scott, the code only looks for .tid files. It would be perfectly feasible for it to retrieve HTML files. And in fact, that's the plan for federation, is that and it's how the plugin library works at the moment, is that you retrieve an HTML file and then you request from the HTML file the individual tiddlers that you need, and that process is indeed on demand. But as I say, the issue here is really about, even talking about it now, it makes me feel, it reminds me how certain I am that users are going to run into endless problems with Nitrate.
I think the main problem is the possibility to edit it, and then if you save it, then it's not external anymore. I think this will be a really big problem.
But I think Tinker, I mean, as we had with the plugin tools, that it's an area where people who are actually using that work may be best placed to figure out the best sort of workarounds and so on to make it to smoothen out work.
Would this be the Would this be the sort of thing that might be better suited to a plugin, to something that comes with a few more warnings on the tin, rather than being an out-of-the-box feature? Thinking back, it reminds me of Udo Borkowski and the include plugin and things that were done in TiddlyWiki Classic.
I don't know. There's two ways to look at it. So yes, first, I have thought that, and doing the external text support meant some core changes, which they couldn't be done in a plugin. But there's no question that we could arrange it so that the exposed usable functionality were in a plugin. But the other possibility is that by having it in the core, that then establishes standards that other plugin implementations that are able to improve things can then slot into those standards. So very difficult, you know. And there's already obviously a lot of complicated features in the core that are apt to confuse people. So I'm not even sure that, you know, introducing complexity isn't necessarily the problem. Okay, so whizzing along, I wanted to very quickly talk about and maybe show quickly TiddlyDesktop. So I think we did at one point talk about a kind of existential problem with TiddlyDesktop, which was that a lot of the feedback that I was getting was, can you make it more like a browser? Can you give it spell checking and so on? And my frustration was that TiddlyDesktop is destined to always be a slightly lousy browser, because browsers are one piece of software that the big companies devote an inordinate amount of resources on. They're the flagship products of the people that make browsers. So that's been kind of gnawing away at me in the background for a while. And then I realized that I needed to work on TiddlyDesktop because it was basically broken. So the last release, I think version 4 that I did at the beginning of the year, was broken for a significant chunk of users on Windows. The sequence was about a month ago. I did a release that started to fix those bugs. So this was version 5. Very minor user interface changes, basically just about bug fixing, but it got me into TiddlyDesktop development, and then led to a 6th release, which did add a significant new feature that people have asked for, which is the ability to drag TiddlyWiki files from the Finder or Explorer directly into the list of files within TiddlyDesktop. And that's also on the journey to being able to drag in files and automatically create external tiddlers and external images, which is something that we've discussed a few times before. And more bug fixes. But there's a new release that I'm working on at the moment that is not ready for prime time, that adds support for TiddlyWiki folders. So I want to show you this because I think it's quite a significant answer to the challenge that I opened with originally, the existential challenge of TiddlyDesktop. So let me screen share and run the new version. So it's actually compiling it, and it takes a few seconds. And does anybody on the call use TiddlyDesktop, by the way? No? I think Matt, I remember talking to you about it, didn't I?
Let's see. What I didn't hear you.
Sorry,
did you
you
ask
guys.
if you've already shown this?
I was wondering if anybody on the call was a regular user of TiddlyDesktop.
Sorry, you guys can't see me giving my thumbs up with my video off, but I do. I've been using TiddlyDesktop for TW5, and I've backwashed into using it for TiddlyWiki Classic a bit as well, though I still kind of split my time between Firefox and desktop for my classic TiddlyWikis.
Scott, we're going to have to start calling you Ernst Stavro Simmons.
Sorry, I realized earlier that she was out of frame. So I'd give her the screen.
I'm a cat lover as well. So here I've got the TiddlyDesktop. Hang on, let me minimize everything else on the Mac. There's a way to do that. Hide others. Okay. So here's the main TiddlyDesktop window. It consists of normally a list of TiddlyWiki files. Now, in fact, this is such a work in progress. This is such a work in progress that if I open the TiddlyWiki file, I don't think it's going to work. No, that's an in progress change. But hopefully, if you're familiar with the current release, you'll be familiar with what happens there. We just get the TiddlyWiki in a window. But now here you can see an entry which is pointing to a sample wiki folder, and that's on my desktop, sample wiki folder 2. So let me and you can see there's some Tiddler files in that folder. So let's open that, and two windows actually open. First a DevTools, and then this is the actual wiki. So if I create a new Tiddler, then switch back to here, you can see that it's created a Tiddler file. So this is what's going on here is a kind of unusual hybrid of the Node.js edition and the browser edition. So it's basically both. It's a single copy of TiddlyWiki that simultaneously it thinks it's in Node running under Node.js, and that's why it's saving each Tiddler as a separate file, and it thinks it's in a browser because it's got a window, and so it's rendering itself into that window too. Now where things get interesting is if I jump back to the source code and show you this JavaScript file is the file that's executed when that wiki folder window is open. So it's the code inside the wiki folder window. One of the things that happens is it boots TiddlyWiki. So if you've done, you may know these internals, that there's a thing called the boot prefix, and then there's the main boot process, and in between you do a few things. And one of them is, this is the command line that is being passed to TiddlyWiki. So at the moment, it's just a path name, so it's the path name of the folder that becomes the wiki folder. If we add the entry server onto it, things get really interesting, because now I can have that wiki open in a window in TiddlyDesktop and yet simultaneously open it in my favorite browser and still have the benefit of all of my Tiddlers saved as individual files. Now this works completely fine, and you'd expect it to work because of the way that NWJS works. But it's, I think it's quite interesting capability. So here we go. There's the wiki open in the browser, and the same stuff is happening, those files. But now let's, in this browser, open a new window and visit 127. So now I'm visiting localhost in Chrome, which of course doesn't normally have a good saving experience in TiddlyWiki. Let's make that guy a bit bigger. And so if in this window I say create a Tiddler, you may have noticed that in the background exactly the same thing is happening in the native window. And so now if I do that, I've created the Tiddler inside Chrome. I'm seeing it reflected inside TiddlyDesktop, and back in the Finder there is the corresponding file. So what to me seems interesting about this is it finally, Node.js, I think that the way that TiddlyWiki uses Node.js is about the simplest thing that it could do. It lowers the barriers as much as possible. It has no dependencies. What you have to do on the command line is pretty minimal to use TiddlyWiki with Node.js. But it's still proven to be understandably a much, much bigger conceptual hurdle for people. But what TiddlyDesktop gives us now is a wonderful fusion of both the familiar functionality like TiddlyFox, so that you get hassle-free saving of the single file, but then you can seamlessly move to working with TiddlyWiki folders and the full power of the Node.js edition. So essentially, it means that you need to stop thinking of TiddlyDesktop as being a kind of poor quality imitation of Firefox plus TiddlyFox, and it becomes the user interface for the Node.js edition of TiddlyWiki. And that's why when you, right from the beginning, TiddlyDesktop's name, as in the .exe, is called TiddlyWiki.exe, because I was always seeing it not really as a separate thing, but as part of TiddlyWiki. So I would like end users to perceive that TiddlyWiki is this desktop application, or it is this HTML file that you can work with. And obviously for developers, they'll continue to think about it with the standard Node.js concepts. Okay, so now that's been way, way, way more of me than there should be. But before we move on, any comments or thoughts about any of the things we've discussed so far?
Jeremy, if this isn't derailing things too much, could you talk just a second about the difference between the Node.js and the browser editions of TiddlyWiki? I think the word edition has thrown me for a loop a little bit here and there. I'm not really into Node.js and haven't explored it very much, but I suspect what's going on, and I'm hoping you can clear up this misconception if I'm wrong, is that essentially Node.js is looking at the same HTML file, well, of course it is, as the browser, but it's building out a different DOM and treating it differently so that the individual files for the individual tiddlers are actually existing in the DOM and then getting saved back into the HTML file at the end of working with them? Or is there more JS magic going on there?
That's not actually quite right. So, great question, Scott. So the first thing is I made a mistake to refer to them as editions. So we in TiddlyWiki we use editions in this very specific sense of meaning a pre-built TiddlyWiki that's designed as the starting point for you or somebody else to start work. And so we've talked about getting things done editions, Bible study editions, and so on. So they're purpose-oriented editions of TiddlyWiki. The word I should have used was configurations. So there's this idea that in my head TiddlyWiki is one single block of JavaScript code, and that code can run in a number of configurations. One of those configurations is the browser, and one of them is Node.js. Now, in terms of answering your... Oh, I'm sorry, and the third one is NWJS, which is what we've just been looking at in relation to TiddlyDesktop. So in terms of what Node.js is, it's kind of half a browser. You Scott, mentioned the DOM. So the browser is, well, one always oversimplifies when you start a sentence like that, but it is an engine for executing JavaScript code, and it is entirely separately the DOM. And the DOM is code that can read an HTML file and construct an object model for it, and the interfaces for talking to it. So Node.js is the same, but there's no DOM. So in Node.js you run JavaScript, but there's no window object. You can't do alerts and so on. Instead, under Node.js, what the JavaScript code can do is the same kinds of things that code running under Linux can do. It can open sockets and streams and files and read and write files. So it's a tool really for building command line tools, and the way that the web is implemented, it means that we use command line tools to build the web because HTTP is a command line protocol. Not sure if that would have helped, Scott. So basically we've got two different environments in which JavaScript can run. TiddlyWiki has been carefully written so that it can run in either of those places. So for instance, one of the components of TiddlyWiki is something called the fake DOM, which is a JavaScript implementation of the DOM that's used under Node.js to get around the fact that there isn't a DOM there. But Scott, I mean, if I'm giving kind of a user level, that was a long explanation. I think that Node.js... Go on, sorry.
Oh, no, sorry. I was going to say, no, I think that's exactly the answer to the question I was asking. I don't know how useful that is for folks, but one of the things that confused me about my brief forays into using the Node edition before TiddlyDesktop was the notion of where these individual TIDs were stored. Where I was looking for files. I was looking for someplace they existed as individual discrete packets.
Right.
If that was just in a data folder. Exactly. I think the DOM helped me as a conceptual framework for how it was dealing with that.
I see. Yes, I mean, in a way, in TiddlyWiki 5, the JavaScript objects have the role of that the DOM does in TiddlyWiki Classic. So that sense you've got of TiddlyWiki Classic storing data in the DOM is pretty absent in TWC 5. You much more feel like you're in this very kind of self-contained JavaScript environment that right at the edge does things to the DOM. And that's, in the time since TiddlyWiki Classic was released, that's become a much more common way of working, because basically DOM interactions are really slow in the browser, whereas pure JavaScript stuff is fast. But Scott, I think the thing about the Node.js edition is it kind of self-selects. I mean, people know whether they're comfortable with the conceptual and concrete complexity of something like Node.js and the command line. And you know, we've had good experiences of encouraging people to experiment with Node.js, but I think it's still way too hard. And you know, especially when I think of my interactions with people outside of TiddlyWiki, you know, the levels of complexity that your brain is assailed with to use the Node.js edition is comparable to being a software developer, and yet clearly one of the things that's very beneficial about TiddlyWiki is this way that it gives you access to things that would normally be the domain of software developers, but without having that skill set. But finishing, long answer to your question, Scott, TiddlyDesktop is absolutely for you, because it's conceptually, you're installing a browser. You're installing a browser that's special because it can only display TiddlyWiki documents, and it has this sort of complexity that you don't even need to know about at the beginning, that those documents can either be expressed as one single file or as a whole bunch of separate files. You know, and there are pros and cons, and the tool TiddlyDesktop becomes a place where people can explore those trade-offs and figure it out. So yeah, I'm really pleased, and I also think actually it's there's a lot of excitement about using Node.js to write server code, and this idea of giving that server code a user interface that's really high performance using NWJS seems like a great fit to me. Right now. Yeah, Scott, there's some comments from Scott saying there's some destructive interference between how it works in the browser and how it works under Node. TiddlyDesktop may be a good bridging tool. So yes, I think it's that making them equivalent from the perspective of an end user. Exactly as I said to you. So, any other thoughts or comments from anybody on the call? Otherwise, what I was proposing to do was to spend a little time talking to Andy, who's here with me, you remember from the beginning of the call, and just explore his experience and talk a little myself about my experience of watching people have that experience. And then you'll have the experience of me talking about the experience that Andy has just had. But say, before we dive off into that, anything from anybody else? On what we've already talked about. Okay, so I mentioned that this is the second time this has happened. Dickon, who's I think not been on Hangouts, but we've had meetings with him. There's videos on my YouTube channel of him talking about. I knew Dickon for many years. He's an accomplished and renowned psychiatrist now, and he discovered TiddlyWiki, and he had the experience that I've read about a lot on the group of people who kind of go like a kid in a sweet shop, kind of get really overexcited, stay up till 3 o'clock in the morning making stuff, and feel empowered in a way that they haven't been before. And this is what's just happened to my friend Andy. So Andy, I wanted to ask you first. So I'm going to just ask Andy a few questions, because that seems like a good way to just draw out some of the things, but then hopefully give everybody a chance to talk.
We have a new visitor.
Yes, Mark. Hello. I just let you in. How are you doing, Mark? Would you like to say hello, where you're from, and something about your connection with TiddlyWiki, Mark? If you've got a microphone.
Yeah, if you can hear me.
Hello, Mark.
I'm Mark Robbins from Detroit, or actually I'm in Las Vegas now, but I've been fooling around with TiddlyWiki for last year or so, and just now getting back into it.
Great. Well, it's great that you could join us, Mark. Again, I mean, everybody here are very active participants in the group, and those of us who've been in the group for a long time, we're actually incredibly grateful. Well, Matt earlier was self-deprecatingly being embarrassed about the fact that he talks a lot in the group, but actually when new people showing up and asking questions has been, it's one of the great things about the group, and you can see things kind of, they build up as new people arrive and ask questions. So Mark, you've been very good like that too. Mark, I've just done a rather, gosh, a lot longer than we hoped, but a summary of what's happened since the last Hangout. Because the last Hangout was months and months and months ago, it was rather a lot of stuff. Now, we were switching to talk to my friend Andy, who's recently become a TiddlyWiki enthusiast. I wanted to touch on a few things with him, ask him a few questions, and then perhaps that'll take us into some interesting discussions about this. Well, I was explaining how another friend has been through the same process, but this kind of enlightenment where TiddlyWiki feels like the answer. And the reason why it's worth focusing on this process, on the kind of how people get introduced to TiddlyWiki, what that experience is like, is of course it's something we want to replicate. We want to remove, it's without question, there's a lot of hurdles and barriers to getting started with TiddlyWiki. And it's useful to try and identify this. So, Andy, had you, prior to discovering TiddlyWiki, I think you mentioned that you'd used Evernote before?
I used Evernote at one point and managed to create an enormous mess for myself within Evernote, a huge sort of mass of information that I...
And you were recording it as a brain dump of things that you wanted to not forget?
Yes, but I didn't... It's interesting, I just restarted using Evernote a couple of days ago, and having gotten to grips with TiddlyWiki a little bit, I suddenly find I know how to use Evernote, whereas I didn't before. I'm able to organize things on there a lot better now. I kind of understand.
And is that in terms of tagging?
Probably in terms of tagging, but also in terms of how you see a slice of information. I think that's really crucial. So I'm using the Evernote now to dump screenshots of bug reports and things on our site into individual Evernotes and then organizing them in different ways.
Okay.
So it's sort of changed the way I have approached information in general.
It's been good brain training for you.
Yeah. Oh, I needed it. I think.
And so you'd never written an Excel macro or created a custom?
Only in the most basic copying off of Google search online kind of way. I spent quite a lot of earlier this year trying to build something that the advisors on our website could, that would guide them through the process of advising a student on how to write effectively and persuasively. And I was doing this in a fairly isolated way, and I tried all sorts of bizarre little schemes to try and structure the ways the advisors moved through.
So what was the very first way that you did to get them a Word document saying do this?
Yeah, Word document and instructions online, and I was trying to find slightly more kind of multi-layered ways of presenting the information, because you have these enormous documents that iterate back and forth between a Chinese student and a Western advisor, and it becomes confusing. And it becomes very difficult to show the Western advisors what to do on our site, because they're not being paid for their training, they're not being paid to learn how to do your process, and they're only being paid in small increments for the work they do anyway. So I wanted something that would be almost a learning while you're making your money kind of process. And I got into a huge mess with trying to do coding in PDF documents and all sorts of things.
So you tried to use interactive PDF features so that they could tick and reveal new types of information.
I wanted to, Bloom's taxonomy, I wanted to have drop-downs for the verbs at the beginning of the sentences on people's resumes to help guide people towards ways of framing what they've done that are higher up the triangle, more impressive types of learning experience.
Okay, so for those who can't see it, Bloom's taxonomy, Googling in the background, is a triangle that goes at the base from knowledge through comprehension, application, analysis, synthesis, up to evaluation. Yes, let me just...
It's a really interesting kind of thing to think about when you're advising Chinese students, because they are, most of our clients are grad students. They've just come out of the Chinese education system, which is heavily focused on the Gaokao exam, which basically, I think everyone knows the stereotypes. It involves rote learning and repetition, and there's no application to university in the way that we're familiar with in China. So this experience of applying to a Western grad school is the first time that the students ever had to account for themselves using these different types of, or displaying these different types of learning. They've always been down near the bottom of the, not that they haven't actually always been down near the bottom of the pyramid, but the ways in which they're used to justifying their intelligence and their learning and their success have all been based on this repeating, understanding kind of type of knowledge. This is a little bit of a tangent, really, but essentially this taxonomy comes with big groups of verbs that are incredibly useful ways to start getting our advisors to encourage the students to reframe their experience for a Western context. And I wanted drop downs with these verbs in them, and it was proving impossible in a PDF. I stayed up all night several times, almost crying, trying to make these drop downs work. It was ridiculous.
So do you just trying to characterize what Andy's doing, because I think there's some timeless elements to it, or also universal elements to it. So and it's a three-level business in a way, that there's Andy and colleagues who are running the business. Then there's these advisors, and then there are customers, I guess, at the end. And so the challenge, I think, is that you're trying to devise a service that can be replicated by people that you don't have massive degree of control over, and yet you want to make sure that the customer experience is a consistent, high-quality one. So I think there are other businesses that are a bit like that. What other businesses do you think are a bit like that?
I think it's something that more or less every business has to cope with, but we're doing this at a vast distance, with very little hold over the people we're engaging with to do the work, at least until they've accumulated some work on their accounts with us, and also some relationship with us. That's proven hugely important to mobilizing this group of about 200 advisors. You have favorites, as my partners sometimes disparagingly refer to the people who I let off for missing deadlines and things, and you have people who you think have promise, and you marshal this slightly motley collection of people towards what is actually a relatively simple piece of it's learning how to write persuasively, and that has components to it, and has a certain sort of mindset. Not all of it can be communicated quickly. So, I
guess as for an engineer, not that I'm an engineer, I must never call myself that because I'm not trained. But there's a sense in which you're building a reliable machine from unreliable components, which is something I think that engineers learn to do, and in a way, as a software, say, developer rather than engineer, we get there's a little sense of that we get from the way that we can experiment with a very good safety net. So it's easy for me to make arbitrary changes to TiddlyDesktop. If I screw up, I can just rewind those changes. So it means that the individual episodes of software development that I do some of them might be unsuccessful, but it doesn't matter. The cost of failure is the cost of failure is the time. And I guess you're trying to engineer the same situation where if one of the advisors screws up, you want to know about it, be able to fix it, and it to be seamless for the customer.
Yes, there are definite consequences to people doing a poor job or not meeting the kind of guidelines that we have. And there's a customer service team in our office who make it very clear to me when they're not happy of being called up and howled at by somebody who feels they haven't had a good service. So definitely there's that aspect, but there's also the aspect of the advisors themselves who I feel very responsible for their time, and therefore going down blind alleys with and experimenting in ways that I maybe in my slightly over eagerness trying to use TiddlyWiki as a document almost that they would send back and forth on our website. That used up an awful lot of time for people, and it was definitely an unpopular decision on my part. But we've found new ways to use TiddlyWiki that are much more effective.
So this is I think actually let's have a quick look at it. So can I bring it up on here, because I think that's gonna, and this is now of course by doing this your work is no longer a secret as it once was.
I don't think it's.
But
much to worry about.
But Andy, Andy, was this your first experience of working in open source?
Oh yeah.
And so one of the things in the background I've been doing is encouraging Andy to ask his questions in open forums so other people can benefit from the answers and so on. And of course, this being in the public, available to the public is useful. So go on, you take over and just tell us what we're seeing here.
Okay.
So who's been sent this URL? Who's going to have landed where we are now?
So this is the trained advisors on our website. This is the sort of the training and guidance resources that are continually being put together. Really, that the nature of how the business is kind of started to sort of get extremely busy in the last few months has meant that things have to be kind of flung together, which makes TiddlyWiki really useful for
a good environment for flinging things together.
Collecting small pieces and then reassembling them. The starting point for most people who apply to be an advisor is this one. It's stupid having them separate, really, but I'm going to move them over soon. This is just a sort of a welcome thing, and basically it directs them to answer questions by looking things up on the training site. So the idea is when you've got people at their most compliant, which is when they're applying to be part of your team, you introduce them to how to navigate your training resources. So once they've successfully passed this test, well, they upload their test.
So hang on. So this first one, this is a small wiki without much in it.
Yeah.
That's acting as a landing page.
It should just be in the other one.
What's this thing? This is something I can edit.
Yeah.
Please. So so you're asking them to perform edits on a particular document in order that you can learn. Okay, I see. So and what's this? Is this an embedded? That's an embedded image.
Yeah, it's just a picture of the order form on our site. But the more important things really are the look something up. Tell us what a baseline edit is by searching on our site. So it's encouraging people.
So this material here, we've got a nicely organized table of contents. This is everything that an advisor working for you needs to know. This is the manual for being that. Okay. And so you've got some introductory stuff. And
so the idea is it is a somewhat sort of overcomplicated process at times. But the idea is that it doesn't look too overwhelming. If there are bits they know that they've figured out from elsewhere, those are already set to know, and so they just open the bits and pieces that are relevant to them, and hopefully it solves problems.
So what I see Andy doing a lot of is applying consistent techniques. So there's a lot of this is about hiding information and only showing it to the people for whom it is relevant. there's Andy makes extensive use of external tools. So what this is an embed of
Google Drive.
It's an embed from Google Drive, and I've seen some other bits and pieces embedded. There's a sense in which some of this stuff ends up being kind of like a bit like with the resume builder that you did, Jed. It's kind of fancy form filling, where you unfold, from a huge library of forms and form elements that you could experience, you unfold your own journey through the forms that make sense for you. I think. Oh, look, there's an embed. What's that?
Yeah, it's a slides, Google Slides.
Okay, yeah.
Which isn't so useful, to be honest. I really ought to try and move some of this into the other things. But the tutorials for the different product types have proven a really, really great way of just putting all this. That one's not working. Putting all this information down in a way that people actually want to consume, or at least they're starting to, rather than being faced with a huge chunk of text.
In the future, that will be a telltale TiddlyWiki misprint that would show that the author of the encyclopedia you're reading was working on TiddlyWiki.
And then with the team, when the submissions for people who we recruit, oh, I can't do the password from here. It's a really long, complicated one. Oh, maybe it was this. So if I just put this link in the group, that's probably the best way. So this is, how do I write?
Yes, click on that.
Yeah. So we ought to be able to open that from here, right?
That's in here.
I've never done a Google Hangout before.
I don't understand the video. I want to open it in a different browser.
So yeah, this is when people submit their responses to our application test. I have a lady who is a space scientist based at the University of North Dakota, who is a ruthless and very stern person, but also rather lovely. And she does the assessments for me. So the initial emails are sent out by my assistant, who is based in the Philippines. Then the submissions come in, and the lady her name is Sherry. Sherry sees the submissions come up here. These are the people that have been emailed. She enters their details in this assessment form, which pops out here. From this, Rax, who's in the Philippines, knows who to send the introductory materials for. They'll then sign up the confidentiality agreement, which she can watch, and then she'll add their accounts to our system. And it's just proven a really kind of easy way of connecting these two people together in a way that I guess I'd have done with a series of links and emails before or something, but it makes it very simple to show them what I wanted them to do.
In a sense, I think it's functioning as an intranet, and it's interesting that TiddlyWiki can do that, because of course one of the characteristics is that Andy is the only person who's editing the material. But I think actually in small organizations that's very often the case, that although an organization would like to think of the intranet as being a kind of place for mutual collaboration, it's often a place for broadcasting information where the authoritative information for an organization or a group or what have you is collected together. And of course, the great benefit of it being the work of a single person's brain, if you see what I mean, is that it has, I think, an inner consistency that you wouldn't, isn't the hallmark of a group effort. So one of the things that's been quite fun is I mentioned that I think it was the middle of August when Andy was Andy already mentioned that he was, it was a very intense period of work. He discovered TiddlyWiki. One of his frustrations, putting into my words what you said at the time, was that the software was a part of the business, so they were reliant on the IT guys to implement the things that they envisaged as being necessary for running the business. And so there's this, again, a bit like with the advisors, there's this secondary level. You don't have direct control of software. You have some degree of control of the IT guys. They have direct control of the software. And I think from what you were saying at the time, that you felt that gave you, I don't know what the word is, not enough control, not enough leverage. It's
very slow.
Yeah, very slow. And I think it's something I've seen as well. There's an imbalance that in the great power struggle between IT and the business, IT, does it plays all the cards really, because without IT you wouldn't be able to do any IT-like things. So in the first instance, what I think TiddlyWiki gave Andy was the ability for he himself to create stuff, and crucially to adopt the kind of very familiar iterative development cycle that we all do, taking advantage of the way that if you save a snapshot of a TiddlyWiki document, you can always revert to it, so therefore there's no obstacle to kind of wholesale reorganizations, waking up in the middle of the night. What if I may use 3 different tags for modeling this part of the system? That's in each of these areas that we've touched on. So we touched on the structure of the business, creating a manual. That's something that Dickon is doing. We talked about the idea that it's about making an intranet, being an authoritative place to publish stuff for a group of people working together. But I think it's really this final bit that we're talking about that's been the transcendental experience for you, was to suddenly turn software into a pliable medium that you can fiddle about with yourself.
With such pleasure as well.
So I got every week or so little snapshots of seeing the stuff that you've seen, and some things seem to just fall together really quickly. So Andy, for instance, had a coherent table of contents very early on. But when I would look inside some tiddlers, I was appalled at how much repetition there was, because I'd be thinking, gosh, I couldn't possibly type that amount. So because Andy at the time we weren't nearby, so we were corresponding online about the stuff. So rather than trying to teach Andy anything really, I took the view that he'd done such a good job of figuring things out for himself that instead I just gave him some pointers. So for a long time we were at quite an interesting point, which was me saying you need to learn about macros, and then I think macros came quite quickly, quite easily. And then for a long time I was prompting you to learn lists and templates.
Yes.
And I think you said that you've just been through the template breakthrough.
Yes, that was a few weeks ago. I just don't know how to describe it in a useful way, really. It suddenly seemed extremely obvious, and I played around with it a couple of times, and I thought, oh my God, how have I taken so long? And I made myself a little diagram of one of the templates they've made, and they're really basic templates, I think. But it was very satisfying to have that capacity. In many cases, when I'm doing things with TiddlyWiki, it's not even necessarily that I really need it, but it's a sort of a self-driving fascination, and from that you actually uncover things that are useful.
Yes, so there's something about the serendipity. You learn it because it's compulsive. You have the compulsion to do so. And also, I guess maybe after a while, you might start to have the confidence that there could be interesting, useful things anywhere that you might be missing out if you don't explore the thing properly. I for a long time have felt that something I see myself doing that other people didn't do, and this goes back 20, 25 years, is with a piece of software that I was using regularly, I would kind of my learning pattern was to figure out how to do what I needed to do. But sooner or later, I'd go through the process of scanning every single menu item and every dialogue and ensuring that I understood what it was and how it fitted together. And I think that's a kind of a mental, quite a big mental change when you go from occupying a corner of a dark room and you don't quite know what monsters are elsewhere in the room to all the lights are on. You know everything that's there, you know, and therefore, you know, to me, I always say the same things, but the crucial characteristic of a tool is that it's predictable, that if you use it to do something that you can predict before you do it, how it's going to behave, and a pair of scissors, you know, works beautifully like that until you try and cut the wrong material. And yeah, it's important. But so, sorry, there's a thing in the sidebar, we were banging on about templates. Yes, the templates that I mean is TiddlyWiki templates. So the idea of a tiddler where we render its content, and when it refers to fields, instead of fields of itself, it's referring to the fields of the tiddler that is being rendered through the template as we... symbol that says plug this thing in here, and it's obviously it's on turbo. It's a turbocharged version because it lets you, you know, it's quite sophisticated in the way that you can build it up. So I agree. I think it's there are other wikis out there that have transclusion. I think there are other wikis out there that have what they call templates, but I don't think that they are like our templates in the way that they work. Anyway,
I think most of them are rendered server-side. So if wikis talk about templates, then they mean server-side rendered stuff most of the times.
Yeah. And there's you know, there's the recursiveness, the way the template is the same as the thing that you're displaying through the template, and the way that you can do that recursively. It's all fun and mind-bending. So how what's the thing that you've done as a growing up or as an adult that you think most plugs into the same brain receptors that TiddlyWiki is now doing? So for many of us, that would have been Lego as a child. Put your hands up if you played with Lego as a child.
Yeah.
Scott has his hand permanently up. Jed, you must have been a Lego child, weren't you?
Me too.
I played with Lego just yesterday with my son. Actually, we have a Mindstorms robot set. So yeah.
You've got Cyber Lego, which I didn't have Cyber Lego when I was growing up. But I mean, I do think Lego has many of the characters, and obviously lots of software would, I think, point to Lego as being something that they aspire to. I mean, so certainly I'd aspire to build something that was as useful for other people as Lego is. But yes, so what else though?
It's very hard to think of many things that have given me this kind of just this weird compulsive drive to keep doing it and to keep tinkering with it, and I could liken it to the way my dad used to build model aeroplanes, but that wasn't me. That passion is such an overused word, but it's that kind of excitement that sometimes at more disillusioned patches in your life you lose track of, and it's pretty unique experience for me. I've always had trouble structuring my thoughts, so it's been an unusual, very unique experience.
A scaffolding for
Legos. I can't beat Lego actually.
Yes, so I mean that was kind of the stuff that I was hoping to explore a little. Oh, lists, that was it. Have you got to grips with lists and filters yet?
I think I have, in a sort of basic sort of way. I don't think I'd have any sort of it's for anyone, but
my not very good theory. So this is, I'm the wrong person to theorize about what it's like for people to work with TiddlyWiki, obviously. I'm the worst person to be doing that. But I've come to believe from what people say that something that's always jumped out at me is that some people, when they talk about this discovery process of TiddlyWiki, they talk as if they have a sense of familiarity as they go through the experience. So that what they're encountering is not an alien artifact made by somebody else, but is like finding a wing casing that, oh my god, it fits me. Finding I was going to say a uniform, but I don't know, any cheerful, some more cheerful things. A pair of shoes that precisely fits your feet. That might be a better metaphor.
It's that realization that you can break it open and look and check inside and literally move things around without anything going calamitously wrong. And at the same time, you're learning how to do things like lists
people want
and
to
recognition.
do all that stuff. What you just said was, isn't it cool that I can go in and do this, this, and this? But that this, and this is meaningless to most people.
But if they have a specific purpose in what they're doing, I don't see why it's meaningless. If they need to accomplish something with it.
But my experience is that there's only a small number of people who sort of, it's as if there's a genetic predisposition to be open to TiddlyWiki. As if, I mean, that would be a bit mad. But it seems obvious to me that there's a large number of people out there who, they're the same as you lot. All of us on this call will use TiddlyWiki or use it as well as making it. And so we must, I think, maybe all share a bit of this feeling that there are people out there who would benefit. Of those people, some of them must have some real barriers that might prevent them from ever getting to grips with TiddlyWiki. People who are subliterate and God knows what might struggle. There must still be a big chunk of people who are sufficiently like us, and the like us, of course, here on the call, we are all male, Western, but the TiddlyWiki world, as opposed to the Hangout world, extends to people in every time zone, in every part of the world. So it's not even people like us in a cultural sense. It's people like us, I think, in a this propensity to enjoy tools, this propensity to have played with Lego as a child. So conscious that we're drawing towards the end of the time that we allocated. I've done most of the talking with Andy's help, and so I think what I'd suggest is that we actually overrun. So obviously, if you have to run, then you should run. But I think let's hold the call till about 2:30, and I think what would be quite nice if we could would be to just do to just take it in turns to bring up anything else that you would like to share. So perhaps we'll do it in the opposite order. So Tobias, anything that you'd like? Please do. Yes.
Yes, and it's concerning what Andy was telling us and your interaction with Andy during this process. I'm wondering a bit now. Andy was lucky enough to get your kind of guidance in his developing process. A question, like a general feeling I have, is that people that come to TiddlyWiki, they might get overwhelmed with all the great stuff and everything, and they might not realize that what they should learn at an early stage is about transclusions and some of those things that you were telling Andy about. Maybe this is worth considering. How do we guide people to take things step by step in the right order?
You're articulating the same point, that there's trailblazers like all of you and Andy who have made a path through TiddlyWiki, and that path is insufficiently well documented, well traveled, and so a bit like that goes back to what I was saying at the beginning. It's why I'm drawn to studying Andy's experience, because I got a different insight than with most of you where we're not friends, excuse me, or didn't have a relationship before TiddlyWiki, so didn't have a before for the before and after. after. I think that's the point I made before. And yeah, it's because, you know, that phrase about paving the cow paths, we need to see, we need the best possible understanding of what does draw people who are attracted to TiddlyWiki in, what path makes sense for them, and what, you know, what obstacles they face on that path. And you're quite right that a lot of what I ended up doing with Andy, so this is all on a one chat stream somewhere, but a lot of it was actually Andy saying stuff, explaining stuff, link, I'd go and look at stuff, say quite a lot less in response, but that would be quite focused on the things that I've found by looking at his code, and so far spending more time probably looking at the wikis than I was replying to you. In order, because I was interested in this idea that I could nudge him towards the material that would be most useful next.
That's very much what you did. It was interesting looking back on it and realizing
that you were being experimented on. Yes,
I appreciate it anyway.
So yes, Matt, really very much in agreement, and you've got a role here because you're a premier writer. Sorry, go on.
There was one of the you showed me how to make a macro. The one actual for, but it was just how to put a picture with a link on it as my next button.
That was it.
Through something I was doing.
Yeah, so that was the repetition that I'd seen, was this
and I used that endlessly. But it slowly occurs to you, just sort of like, you know, head in your hands kind of way, that you can do all these other things with this one very simple thing that you showed me.
So I think I said endlessly that my aspiration for TiddlyWiki is that it should consist of layers of features, where the most fundamental you only need to learn the most fundamental features when you first start using it, and then you can progress up to the more complex features, and that the more complex features rely on the simpler features, but there's no links the other way, so to speak. And it does seem as though that is my experience of watching people, is that's been largely true. You know, that we see on the group a lot of people who, well, actually are kind of in the situation Andy was, who are already making effective use of TiddlyWiki and finding it useful, and yet they don't know about macros, or, you know, something that can seem quite fundamental, and so really interesting to see how valuable TiddlyWiki can be, even to the people who aren't using. So one of my litmus tests has always been that TiddlyWiki should be great for people who literally all they're doing is making a sequence of documents that they want to be able to do full text search through. So basically the features of Apple's Notes application that's built into the iPhone. It's just a list of notes with titles. You can click on one, you can open it. And that functionality is a sort of pale shadow of TiddlyWiki, because there's no tagging, there's no nothing. And yet, I think that actually the ability to do that full text search over a whole slew of different documents, that, you know, it's not so easy done elsewhere. My operating system, with the Mac, lets me search, but it kind of searches everywhere. It's not so easy to do a kind of project search, so to speak. So I'm very conscious, probably because there are two of us here, I've done less on the sidebar, kept up less well on the sidebar than I would normally try to do. So Matt, picking out a sentence, Matt says things like Jed's guide is probably a good thing. I think the position that we're in now is that we have built up a lot of great material. Tobias, your kind of FAQ material, the way you've got a lot of stuff on, I can never remember, it's T4A, TV4A, anyway, your site, that has an inordinately, an extensive collection of incredibly useful information. Similarly, Matt's site. We really need to be consolidating these, whether by means of pull requests to the existing core documentation, or whether by means of more fancy federation. I'm not sure. But that's definitely something that we need to address.
The audio is working right now.
Here.
Please go.
Can I talk? I don't know who else. There was someone else commenting something. Okay, I'll take the word here. So yeah, one point here is that we have a lot of information, and you mentioned Tobias's site, which is a fantastic site, and there are other places, and you mentioned my site, which I'm not sure is a good entry actually for someone who is new to this, but the point I was making that in how you helped Andy was that it was a more sequential thing, that you could see right away that, okay, this piece of information is what would benefit him the most at this stage. So what I'm thinking is that it would be really good if we had some kind of official sequence, like a general recommendation to in which order to learn the basics for TiddlyWiki.
I agree.
To make the most of it. Obviously, it won't fit everyone, of course not. But you know, macros, for instance, that's pretty much early on when you actually start to experiment with things. Or obviously, transclusions is a subject that everyone should learn before macros, for instance. And you know, so kind of some way to organize this.
That's amazing. So we shut the door, and Matt got cut off, and then opened the door again, and you came back. So Wi-Fi does not like wooden doors. That's extraordinary. But Matt, I'm sorry. So because of that, I missed half of what you were saying. Oh, now you've gone silent. I can see you, but I can't.
No sound.
Can anybody else hear Matt?
No.
Oh, Matt, that's very frustrating.
No.
Matt, we can't hear.
Can you hear me now, Jeremy? Or
Yeah, Tobias, we can hear you. Yeah.
oh, okay, so after all,
Oh, now you're back. Yes.
good. And let me
Matt, there is no sound. Matt.
gone again. Okay, so maybe it's too much for this computer.
Tobias is there, but Matt is gone.
Ah, okay. Okay, good. So
Matthias here.
Oh, okay. Maybe
Matthias
I
here.
can finish this
Can you hear me?
thought.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
You can hear me.
Yes.
Yes. Everyone? Can everyone hear me?
Sure.
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, so I will. Did I just go mute again?
There must be something equivalent to the door that we can open and close to mend or break the Wi-Fi. That's happening to your microphone. But look, the sequence. Whilst you debug that, I do have a thought about this. That I showed you earlier on the introduction edition. Now, the introduction edition, as well as I did it in order to make the YouTube video that that's on the front page of TiddlyWiki. So it's a part of the video, but it's also actually my attempt to teach TiddlyWiki in the right sequence. But of course, it's in the form of a presentation. Now, you saw on the latest TalkyTalky thing where I've got that show notes thing. So that I think would be quite an interesting approach for me to play with, to have it so that on the introduction edition you get the same presentation capability, but to extend it, and but to have show notes that would then more narrative about each feature that we introduce. And obviously I'm talking about the same documentation that we have on tiddlywiki.com about those things, just arranged into a matching sequence. Now, when I was first working on that introduction edition, I did do a fair amount of work on little kind of interactive demos. So the kind of thing, Jed, I think you've done a bit of this as well, where one you give them a text box so that the user can interactively try out transclusion, that kind of thing, and then automatically stepping to the next point when they select something, making it into a little bit of a sort of training game. But anyway, I'm not the one who's got lots of free time, so it probably won't be me that does that.
I was
Mark
thinking,
said, oh, I saw it. So sorry, I was just going to say that Mark said in the background, macros and variables expansions and quotations still confuse me a lot. I always feel like I am in a monkey trap. Mark, so here's something I've not said in a Hangout, but I'll address it to you. That one thing I think I have learned in the 5 years of TiddlyWiki 5 is that it's too complicated, just slightly too complicated. And I'm not 100% sure right now what we could do away with, but I think a big danger sign is the similarity of transcluding a macro to transcluding a tiddler. And yet, if you have worked with TiddlyWiki for any length of time, you'll appreciate how those are completely different things in TiddlyWiki 5 at the moment. So it's an area where the things that I say about TiddlyWiki's architecture perhaps breaks down, where we have apparently similar things being done by completely different mechanisms. So my current sort of background research thing is some grand unified TiddlyWiki, which has slightly fewer rules. So basically hoping to unify variables and tiddlers so that they are the same thing. And that I think might be, it doesn't sound like it, but I think it might address the problems that you've been having, Mark, with so much similar looking stuff, doing similar things, but being slightly different. It sounds like, Matt, you were just saying you got to go. Matt, goodbye. I think we've lost your mic again. But Matt, great you could join us. We should also welcome Alex. Alex, hi. Somebody might need to mute. Well done. Alex, hi. Would you like to say hello, introduce yourself, and say where you're from and your involvement with TiddlyWiki in the time-honoured way? Are you microphoneless, Alex? Okay, well, such as life, that happens sometimes. But hello, Alex. I've been in correspondence recently with Alex, where he's very kindly asked me to help him with what sounds like a really cool project. So I hope, if he's at liberty to speak about it, that... no, Alex, we can't hear you. Sorry, Alex is saying in the background, can we hear him? No, we can't. I'm actually using my laptop speakers and microphone, which I don't normally do, and it seems to be working fine. But while we're waiting, Tobias is saying something very interesting in the background. I was just thinking that today we demonstrate examples via a code block, and then, if existing, a preview. A much better way would be to render the example code in an editor and then the preview below. Yes, so that they can edit it live. I quite agree. And it may be, Tobias, that there's quite a few macros being used in the presentation of the documentation, and so maybe that there's some scope for sprucing up existing macros, which would be maybe low-hanging fruit, and if not, maybe there's some scope to refactor some of the documentation into macro calls that would lend themselves to that kind of stepwise improvement. Cool. So, Jed, we've hardly heard anything from you, and I should have mentioned to everybody, but right at the beginning, Jed's presence reassured us all that you're safe after all the terrible events of the last few hours. But Jed, how are you doing? And and welcome. Do you? And we'd love to hear what you've been up to.
Okay, yeah, well, very quickly then about Paris. We are on the other side of the city, so I have not heard anything. So we're all fine as far as that goes. I have done a lot of stuff since the last Hangout, and not all of it is something that's really easy to show. But should I just go through and do a quick...
Yeah, I'd love that. I'm going to turn my camera off in case that's contributing to the bandwidth problems. But take the floor, please, John.
Well then, let's see if the screen sharing works correctly this time. This one, does that work?
Yep, that was looking good to me, Han. I'm just going to click you so you stay on even when we talk.
Okay, so the quickest thing to go through is I have updated the row and column table macros that I had made. Some people had requested some new features on that group not that long ago. So right now, there are these simple macros. Everything is in this tiddler, although I should split that into two for reasons I'll get into. So yeah, right now you can just say with the macro column table and then a filter, and it will list the each tiddler as a column, and each field in that tiddler as a row with the values in here, and you can click on a value and edit it to do whatever you want. And it will correctly create fields and all of that. And then there's row table, which is the same thing, just transposed so that the tiddler names are on the rows instead of the columns. And then the biggest improvement is that you can just give a filter for both things, and for the tiddler names and for the fields if you just want to display a subset of the fields. And this also works for tiddlers that don't exist, so it will create it correctly and it will. And that is just a quick thing there. Somebody had asked about it, so I made it, and I think that's most of that. Since I live in Paris and I don't really speak French, I made a little flashcard thing for me to learn French. It is built almost completely out of using templates to automatically generate flashcards. I put up a version of this online. There's a link to it somewhere. I think I put a link to it in the groups, but as far as the technical aspects of this go, it's nothing all that amazing. Or nothing all that new. Just a bunch of transclusion and templates being put together, which lots and lots of set field things, but I don't think that is all that interesting right now. Yeah, there were a bunch of different cases that I had to deal with for the different buttons, but the part of this that actually I am happiest with is I did a very small edit to the keyboard widget so that it can trigger action widgets, and I can be in the text box and hit enter, and it'll move to the next thing.
Very nice, very nice. Well, there is an outstanding. I can't remember what the status is. There is an outstanding pull request for that, but there was a first version that I can't quite. I'm so sorry. I don't have it at my fingertips, but I would love to get that into the core.
Yes, yeah. For that, you had put something on it. I need to fix something for the keyboard widget part. Yes, the other action widgets that I had that would trigger, the widgets that would trigger action widgets like the checkbox and things like that. There are problems with that I don't think is...
Yes, I remember those ones. That's because we haven't had a refresh of the action widget to reflect the change in the checkbox widget by the time we compute the action widgets. But the keyboard widget, there was some other issue, wasn't there, or was it? No, it is. It's just sitting there, and I haven't merged it, possibly.
Yeah, the keyboard widget, I don't think has any problems. I think there was some typo in code or something like that. But
I'm so sorry, because for the last few weeks I have been very slow on pull requests, and there's a few that have probably slipped into the cracks. Certainly, if anybody on the call or watching this, if you have a pull request that you think is mergeable and it hasn't been, do ping the thread on that pull request to bring it back to my attention.
Yeah, but yes, for this, it essentially just makes the keyboard widget in some ways functionally identical to the button widget for that whenever the key sequence that you use, the keyboard widget is hit, then it does the same as if you had clicked on a button. That is actually part of this that I think is the most relevant to other things. Like I said, the flashcard framework is up online at one of my demo sites. It's inmysocks at tiddlyspot.com. Has a list of everything. So let's see, there's that one. Oh, the calendar thing, which I have been working on and off. This I am actually also quite happy with. It requires a lot of work on the interface because right now it is horribly ugly and requires lots and lots of scrolling to see what's going on. But I have been including a lot of things that people have suggested in this to make it much easier to use. One of those is that you can have different, you can set different themes for each individual calendar. Like this is the demonstration one right now. So you just set a default theme, which alternates dark and light for different ways, and then you can edit. And this is actually editing the alternating theme when you put in the calendar widget, which I suppose I should probably actually introduce. This is a widget that I made. It's been a plugin, but the calendar widget, you just make the widget call its calendar month and give it some inputs, and then it displays the calendar like this. And but anyway, you can give it a theme to use, and those themes you can edit through a tool that I have here. This is all currently in development, so a lot of that will change, but you can edit individual parts of it using this, and then the theme will be saved. And part of this that was most requested was you can put special dates like this, my birthday, the day after my birthday, and you can have each theme. Where are we here? Yes, you have each theme display or not display.
And so this day after stuff, is that automatically generated, or have you created an entry for the day after your birthday?
Oh, I created an entry. There's Jed's birthday, and this has the appropriate day, and it's tagged with birthday. And then day after is just day after. I could probably set something up to automatically generate that, but it would require including some of the math things like Tobias' calc thing would probably be a good way to do that. But yeah, so they're displayed there, and you can turn them on and off for each configuration, which is there. And I have been working on, right now that doesn't have any special thing. What I've currently been working on is a way to automatically generate the macros for what happens when you click on a date. Right now, it just opens up the journal tiddler for that day. But I have the bare bones framework for having it pop up like the same thing, but it pop up in a little window, or come up as a modal, or pop up a little dialog to add a event for that day. That might take me a while to finish, considering the complexity of that and how I have so many other things I'm trying to do. But this is in its current state, is available also online if you want to play with it. I would suggest not doing too much with it since it might be changed a lot in the future. I don't think any of the styling part is going to change, so hopefully it won't break anything, but I wouldn't trust that. Let's see. Oh yes, I've also worked a bit on the macros for dates, so that you could do, the day after, the day before, the next week, things like that. But none of them are in a state that can even really be demonstrated at the moment, so I'm not going to even try. Oh yes, this one is for list operations, but it looks like the I don't remember who it was. Somebody else was working on this, and they had a much more elegant solution than I have. So.
Is it Buggy BJ? Buggy
yeah.
Jeff.
So, I think that I should probably just drop that one since I like his solution much better. I do not know if there's anything else that I have done that has any.
Okay, so what you're showing us here, Jed, this is your personal dashboard to your stuff. This isn't online, is it?
Oh no, this is online. This is this is all of the example.
This is in my sock. This is not TiddlySpot.com.
This is yeah, this is the inmysocks one. Things I have made. Searchable list of things I made. Yeah, so there's a link to it there, and this has all of the toys that I'm playing with at the moment. So.
No, it's not. Sorry, Jed. I'm visiting. Oh, okay. It's the OK Tech one. I just visited in my socks, and I'm not seeing the same wiki.
Oh no, this is like the home thing for inmysocks. The what to do under things that I've made. That link will bring you to it.
Okay.
So.
Got it.
And I can't think of anything new. And yes, Tobias, I completely agree that a date field would make it much nicer. Yeah, there's a lot of change. Oh, sorry, Tobias just said in the side that an actual date field would be much nicer to use than what I currently have set up for the calendar, and I agree. But like I said, there are a lot of changes that need to be made for it. So yeah, that's my stuff.
Awesome. Jed, thank you very much indeed. We do need to draw to a close now, I'm afraid. But I hope to have the next Hangout very soon, and as I say, hope to publish a schedule for the rest of the year so that we can hopefully get them going more regularly. So today, I would like to thank you all very much for coming. As I always say, the thing for me that makes the Hangouts so interesting and worth doing is the contributions from everybody else. So with that in mind, I'm sorry that so much of today's Hangouts has been me talking, but that, as I say, is, I think, because such a long time has passed since the last Hangout. But thank you very much to everybody. Thank you to Andy for joining me today. And I'll look forward to seeing everybody hopefully next time. Eric, I'm most impressed that you've seen it through to presumably dawn is breaking over the Pacific now. Or have you actually... Eric might have drifted off as dawn broke over Silicon Valley. But guys, thank you very much, and we'll do our usual waving goodbye to everybody, and then brief remarks towards spring. So cheers, everybody. Bye.